Hi, I'm Anita.
And I'm Jordan, and today I want to talk about the weather.
Really? The weather?
Absolutely. Why don't you tell us, Anita, about one of the craziest storms you've been in?
Okay, I actually have been in a really crazy storm. A few years ago, I was playing soccer with my soccer team, and this big storm came in. There was thunder and lightning. It started pouring rain, so we had to run to our cars and start driving home. But on the way home, my friend and I could see through the windows that the cars coming up on the other side of the street, the water was like all the way up to their doors. And when we looked out the windshield, it started raining so hard that we could barely see through the windshield. We could barely see even the lights in front of us. So we decided we better make the safe decision and pull off into a plaza, and then we waited the storm out there.
And you were safe?
We were safe.
That's really good. I ask because today's big idea is that Jesus helps us through the storms of life. And even though that refers to the hard things and difficult things in our life, it'll help us to understand better when we think about an actual storm. Let's watch this.
Did you know that Hawaiian pizza was invented in Canada and it's the most popular pizza in Australia? Hey everybody, Liza here. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to share a story with you about a time when I was about to walk home from work, and I looked up at the sky and there were some clouds, but I thought I can beat this storm. And so I started walking, it was fine, and then all of a sudden I felt the first drop. And then that drop turned into a trickling of water, and I thought, okay, that's fine, it's keeping me cool. And then all of a sudden, boom, downpour. I was soaking wet, drenched. I was so sad. I thought, oh, how am I gonna get home in this? I'm so cold. And then I changed my attitude and thought, okay, you're gonna get there, just stay positive, keep going. And then before I knew it, I got home, I was safe and sound, and warm and cozy, sipping on hot chocolate. In today's God story, we're gonna hear about a time when Jesus and his disciples got stuck in a storm and what happened to them. But first, let me introduce our big idea. It's a good one. Jesus helps us through the storms of life. We're in the book of Mark, and that's one of the gospel books. That's a book that shares about the good new message of Jesus. And the book of Mark is the second book in the New Testament. It comes after Matthew and before Luke and John. So Jesus had been spending time with his disciples, traveling, teaching, and healing people. After he had been teaching with stories called parables, it was nighttime, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go to the other side of the lake." And so they left the crowds that had been listening to Jesus teach, and Jesus and his disciples went off in a boat. Let's find out what happened next in Mark 4. A wild storm came up. Waves crashed over the boat. It was about to sink. I don't know about you, but if that were me, I'd be super scared. Jesus was in the back sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him up. They said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up and ordered the wind to stop. He said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. Could you imagine how incredible it would have been to have seen that happen? Remember that story I told you about at the beginning when I was caught in the rain? If someone ordered the rain to stop and it actually did, I would have been blown away. I don't think the disciples actually thought Jesus would be able to stop the wind and the waves, but he sure did, and they were shocked. Jesus said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Don't you have any faith yet?" You see, we fully know that Jesus is Lord and God, but the disciples didn't fully know this yet. They knew that Jesus was a great teacher and that he was special in some way. They were afraid because they didn't totally know who Jesus is yet. At that point, they didn't truly get that Jesus is God. But after this happened, they asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him." The wind and the waves. Come on, the wind and the waves don't simply obey a good teacher or a special person, they obey God. So while the disciples would still question who Jesus really was before their time with him was done, they were starting to understand that he was so much more than just a great teacher. Jesus was someone that could calm the wind and the waves, and we know that he is God's son. We call him our Lord. So when we're afraid because we're in a real storm or we're in a tough situation, so I'm not referring to a weather storm, Jesus is there with us. He wants to help us. He will get us through it. As we grow older, there'll be different storms or tough situations that we go through, but we can always be sure that Jesus helps us through the storms of life. All right, everyone, that's it for me this week. It was great spending time with you. See you next week.
Quickly, turn to the person next to you. And discuss the following questions.
Question time! When the storm started, what was Jesus doing? What did Jesus say to the wind and waves? Jesus helps us through the storms of life. What kind of things are like storms in our lives? Game time! Groundhogs. Can you say the key verse before all the groundhogs drop? Get ready. 3, 2, 1, go! Say it with me. Anyone who welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. Mark 9, verse 37.
There's so much about that God story that really stood out to me. It is so easy when you're going through the tough times in life to focus on the problem and to forget that Jesus is there and he wants to help us through that. And what was really amazing and mind-blowing is that the storm, the winds, and the waves actually obeyed Jesus.
Absolutely. We want to share with you the story of our good friend Dagmar. As a kid, she faced a lot of storms in her life. Let's see how she handled that.
So I think the thing I remember the most about my parents being divorced was going back and forth between two houses. And sometimes I would forget things. So maybe I would forget my homework at my dad's house and then get to school and the teacher would be like, "Where's your homework?" But it would be all the way across the city and I would always get in trouble. And I remember just really feeling lonely and sad about that all the time. So my mom worked 3 jobs. She did everything that she could to take care of us really well. But that also meant that she wasn't around a lot because she's struggling so much just to make ends meet for you. At the time, I think I wondered how loved I really was. When I was going to school and being with my friends, I would see them with their families and they were all very happy and I just didn't feel like I had that. And so I often didn't want to tell people. So I would make things up. I would sort of not tell the truth, or I would just kind of leave out parts of my life and my story because I felt so self-conscious and I didn't want to be made fun of. It was very challenging to deal with, and it cost me friendships and it cost me my sense of self. I would make friends with anybody, whether they were a good person or not a good person. And I would do whatever was happening at the time. So if people were skipping school, I might decide to do that. If people were doing other things, I would do other things. Like I just sort of was easily led into directions that ended up being mistakes and having consequences for me. So I was always writing poems when I was younger. And they were very bad poems, but I loved writing them because I was so emotional. There are times where I really was depressed and had a lot of anxiety, and I didn't necessarily always feel like I had somebody that I could talk to or go to or trust. And so in those moments, that writing became very important to me. One day I just began to sort of feel like I was wanting something more. I had a friend who was a musician, and he invited me to his Easter concert at his church. And I said, sure, I'll go. There's music, it's a play. Let me see what this is like. And I went in, and for the first time, I realized what music was actually meant to be used for. And that I'd been playing music and writing music and singing and performing for a long time, but it didn't feel like this. And so I started to write more often, and I began to write without the constraints of, or the limits of writing just within a song form, like rhyming and things like that. And then it just opened up everything for me, and it became a way that I could really share with other people some of the things I'd experienced and gone through, and to help people hear about Jesus and to help people know that they're not alone. So I started doing spoken word, and I just went to open mics and started getting on stages and sharing my pieces. And one night I had a beautiful experience where a girl came up to me after and was like, I understand what you've been through, and she was really moved by it. And I think it was that moment that I realized this is actually something that God wants to use. This is no longer about me and my process or me and my writing, but that this can be something that I could use to share the gospel with people. So I get my inspiration from a lot of different places. Sometimes it's everyday life, something a friend is going through or something I'm going through. It could be something as simple as shopping at a vintage store. And then when I begin to write, it's like that's fuel for the fire, that when I get to the paper, I actually have more to pull from because of those things. So as a kid, I really felt like I didn't know who I was, and looking for acceptance in places that were maybe not the best for me and for my heart. But then once I met Jesus, everything changed. Everything in your life begins to have just a little more hope in it. And that all the things that you go through are for a reason, and that He will use all of them for good. And so now, knowing who I am in Him has just given me this really great opportunity to feel so loved and so planted and so solid in what He says about me and who He says I am, that I can use that overflow to sort of talk to other people about it and let them know that there's somebody that loves you.
Wow, I love how Dagmar's face lights up when she talks about Jesus.
Yeah, Dagmar's life changed completely when she made Jesus the Lord of her life. And now she's in a position to encourage others because she's been through pain and storms in her life. And she also knows the freedom and healing that comes from knowing Jesus.
Yeah, and just like Jesus calmed the storm when the disciples panicked, Jesus can calm the storms, the hurt, and the pain that we sometimes experience in our own lives.
Let's break up into small groups and see what this looks like in our own lives.